We're up to the second L in our acronym FALL. In this module, we're talking lenses. This is the TheIndieLot, and you're at the Filmmakers Bootcamp. As we start off this module talking about lenses, I wanted to turn back to my iPhone again. I've used this phone and at times this iPod Touch right here. So you've seen both of these devices a few times now. I've used these for shooting films and especially in my early days before I had a DSLR camera to use. The thing that is available now for the iPhone, I don't have any experience with it, but I wanted to just introduce you to the concept of interchangeable lenses for your iPhone. If you do an internet search, you can find all kinds of lenses that attach to the iPhone of various focal lengths. I wanted to just make you aware of that, as well as there is an application that I've installed on my phone called Filmic. There's a website too here for Filmic as well. And this is an application that is used to control your phone's camera. And what this application does is it gives you access to be able to completely control those three settings that we've been talking about regarding the exposure triangle, and that's your ISO, your shutter speed, and your aperture. So one of the things you don't want to do is you don't want to leave the decision making for focus or those three settings. You don't want to leave that up to your camera. There are automatic settings that you can set your camera to. You know, if you have like a DSLR, you don't have to work in manual mode. But when you start leaving details to the camera, such as focus, for example, what you'll find is that your camera is going to lose focus because it's not going to know what to focus on. It's going to be deciding what to focus on. You're not going to be making that decision. So if there's movement, something else moves in frame, the camera may decide to focus on that instead and take focus off your main character. All right, have a look at this video here. I filmed this at our local zoo on my iPhone, and watch how the focus just continually shifts in and out. It doesn't know whether to focus on the hippo, it doesn't know whether to focus on the bars, and so you can kind of see these subtle shifts of focus between the hippo and the bars. And this is one of the problems, again, of shooting in automated mode, because you're letting the camera decide what to focus on. And you want to be the one, as the cinematographer, as the director, you want to be the one that's making those kinds of decisions. So you want to actually be in control of all of these settings yourself and run in a completely manual way. And so it takes a little getting used to if you're not, and some learning, but it's definitely worth it in the end. So you want to control that. And the application Filmic will turn your camera into, or I'm sorry, will turn your iPhone camera into a camera that you can control those settings. If you just use the camera as is with the default application, you won't have any control of that, and your camera will be making all those decisions for you. We'll probably talk a little bit more about this in a bit, but I just wanted to make sure to iterate that you don't want to leave focus and ISO and shutter speed and aperture in automatic settings. You want to have those in complete manual mode, so that you as the director and you as the photographer or cinematographer, you are in complete control of those details. So now let's jump into this topic of lenses, and I'll show you some of the lenses I use in my camera. And so here is my camera sitting on the stand as I'm recording myself. This is a Canon T5i. It's a great introductory camera. When I bought it, it came with its own lens. It's called a kit lens, an 18mm to 55mm zoom lens. That's what you see on this camera right now. Again, it's a great introductory camera. These lenses right here, I want to show you some of these lenses as well. This is the Canon 50mm lens. Now the one you just saw on my camera itself, that's an 18mm to 55mm zoom lens. All right, this one is called a prime lens. It's not a zoom. So this is just straight up 50 mil lens, and that's it. You don't zoom in with this one, okay? Pull this lens cap off here. You can see here it says 50 millimeter 1.8, and then STM. I forget exactly what STM stands for or what it means, but basically it's a motor. When you're in automatic focus mode on this, the camera will then adjust the focus of this lens using a motor. And I said just a moment ago, you want to get out of automatic mode and keep it in manual mode, especially, if you're using a lens like this one. Because what I found with this, when I used to run it in automatic mode, is when it would focus, the motor was really loud with this lens, and so the microphone would pick up the sound of the motor. And so you can see here, there's this setting, autofocus and manual focus, and you can see that I have it switched to manual focus. And what that does, what it allows me to do is use this focus ring right here and be able to focus that lens manually. Pull off this cap here. Now this is the lens mount that mounts into the camera body itself. And you can see this one's made of metal, so it's pretty solid, pretty sturdy. The one that I just showed you that's actually filming me right now, that's mounted on my camera, that's my kit lens, and the mounting unit here is actually made of plastic on that one. And so, especially with that lens, I try to be very careful because it could easily get damaged and that mounting ring get broken. And so I try to be very careful with that. So that's my 50 mil lens. By the way, I should just say this. I picked this lens up, and I recently just checked on Canon's website recently, and it's still the same price. It hasn't changed in over a year. You can get this lens brand new for $125. This lens right here, this is a zoom lens like my kit lens. I said my kit lens is an 18 to 55 millimeter. This is a 75 to 300 millimeter, okay? And here's what it looks like. Here's again with the focus ring. Here's the switch for the auto or manual focus and autofocus. If I pull off this, the lens mount here also is it's made of metal, so very nice and sturdy. Another thing I can tell you about these lenses is right here, if you look right here on my 75 to 300 mil, there's this marking here, 58 millimeters, okay? On my 50 mil, it says here 49 millimeters, and on my kit lens that's mounted on this camera right now, that one is marked as 58 millimeters. And what that means is there are any number of filters that you can purchase. Let me see if I can get this open. All right. And for example, I purchased this is a 49 millimeter neutral density filter. You can see it's dark, and what that marking means is that if you ever want to attach any kind of filter, you buy a filter that matches the size that's marked here. So this one here says 49 millimeters. This is a 49 millimeter filter, and it just screws right on into the end of the lens just like that, and there's my filter. And this filter was really important for one of my shoots that I did outside in the sun, and it was way too bright, and so this was like sunglasses for the lens, right? The other thing that we haven't really talked about, but the lower your f-stop value, the more shallow depth of field you get in a shot, okay? And what's meant by that, if you don't understand that term, you've seen it and you would recognize it. And you've seen shots where the character, the subject of focus is in focus and everything behind them is out of focus. That's called shallow depth of field. When you see a shot where everything's in focus, including the foreground and the background, that's a long depth of field, okay? The lower the f-stop, the shallower depth of field you get. And so in the sunlight, if you're shooting, it's too bright, so you have to increase that aperture, right? And so what happens is it reduces or takes away completely your shallow depth of field. And so if you're shooting outdoors and you want to be able to get a shallow depth of field, then you want to be able to attach a neutral density filter, for example, which then acts like sunglasses on your lens, and it allows you then to dial down the f-stop or aperture value. And again, the lower you can get that, the shallower depth of field of the shot you can get. And that shallow depth of field, along with the shutter's 2 times the frame rate, remember we talked about that? So if you're shooting at 24 frames per second, that would be 48 on the shutter speed. And if you're shooting at 30 frames per second, that would be 60 on the shutter speed. All right, so that ratio of motion blur that's created by the shutter, along with the depth of field, the shallow depth of field, is considered a cinematic film look type of shot. And so that's what this would be used for. And that's what these markings here on your lens mean when you see that, okay? It's just simply to let you know what kind of filter or what size filter that you can attach. And there's various filters for all kinds of stuff to change shading and coloring and things of that nature. So there are some that are just clear. They don't do anything except just protect the lens itself. Just keep in mind that you want to make sure that you do everything in manual mode. Don't ever leave your exposure settings or any of your focus on your camera or your lenses. Don't ever leave that up to auto mode. Your camera's not going to necessarily know what to focus on.